There are two primary ways to create animations in web applications. We can use CSS and JavaScript. In CSS, we have a couple of properties like transition and animation. And with these properties, we can animate DOM elements. So here's an example. I've defined a CSS class called stretch. In this class, we have two properties, animation name and animation duration. When we apply this class to a DOM element, the browser will animate that element, okay? Now, if you have been working with CSS for a while, chances are you have heard of a library called animate.css. So if you go to Google and search for animate.css, all right, look at this first link here. So this is a library that gives us a bunch of predefined classes for various kinds of animations. So we don't have to manually build these animations with CSS properties. So here's an example. From this drop-down list, you can select an animation and then see that animation in action. See, that's the bouncing effect. Okay, now here's another example. We've got pulse. So very simple and beautiful animation. You can look at their GitHub page. It's very easy to use. All you have to do is install this animate.css via npm, then add it to your HTML files, or in Angular world, you need to import it into styles.css, just like how we imported Bootstrap into our styles.css, okay? And then finally, all you have to do is to apply these classes on your elements. It's really easy to use. I'm not gonna go over this more because our focus here is purely on Angular and not CSS. So, as you saw, we can certainly use CSS to create animations, but these CSS animations give us limited control. So we often use these for simple one-shot animations like showing a tooltip or toggling UI element states. If you want to build something more complex that needs fine-tuned control, then you really need to use JavaScript. Now, in terms of the implementation, there are various libraries out there that give you an API for implementing animations in JavaScript. I personally have used jQuery before, but there are many other libraries out there. But the recommended approach is to use the Web Animations API, which is basically a specification for animating DOM elements, and is currently supported natively in Chrome, Firefox, and Opera. So if you head over to caniuse.com, on this page, you can see what features are implemented in what browsers. So let's search for Web Animations API. Now, here you can see Web Animations API is widely supported in Firefox, Chrome, and Opera. Microsoft Internet Explorer and Edge, just like always, are behind the game. But don't worry, because there are polyfills that you can install, and then you can use web animations in these other browsers. Now, what does our code look like? Here's an example. So we get a reference to a DOM element, and then we can call the animate method on that element. As simple as that. So there are basically two ways to create animations in web applications. You can use CSS and or JavaScript. But where does Angular come in this picture? Well, Angular has a module called Angular Animations. And this module is built on top of the standard Web Animations API. So instead of us directly working with this API, we're going to work with the abstractions provided by Angular. The benefit is that our code is going to be easier to unit test and also easier to port to a different platform. So when we code against these abstractions, then potentially we can take our code and run it inside an iOS or an Android environment and use animations natively in that environment. So we are not tightly coupled to the implementation of web animations in browsers. Next, we're going to look at animations in Angular in more detail.